When you've been praying for love, and it finally finds you, it can be utterly captivating and make you feel unshakable. But sometimes, answered prayers come with a price. You're so enchanted by him, you only listen to your heart and stop listening to your head. If he seems too good to be true, he just might be. And before you know it, you're in deep with a wolf in sheep's clothing. Saturday, July 31st, 2010. It's a beautiful morning in the college town of Beaumont, Texas.
It's a good place to live. Lamar University is a great up-and-coming university and a real draw for the area.
Lamar University is in a part of Beaumont that's predominantly surrounded by a residential area.
At 7:45 a.m., a patrol officer is just making his rounds through campus when he hears an unexpected sound. Gunshots.
Seconds after he hears the sounds of gunshots, he sees a panicked man running towards him.
The officer pulled over and asked him what was going on.
The man identifies himself as Ronald Woods.
He says his fiancée and her daughter are in grave danger and that he needs help.
Ronald says a man opened fire on him and his family in their home, and they all scattered.
The officer at that point told Ronald to get in the car. He called for backup and they sped to the house.
The home is less than a block away, and it doesn't take long for additional officers to arrive.
Police come out of nowhere. It's a dangerous situation. They got their guns drawn.
They don't know what's going on. They don't know if there are live victims on the scene.
As one officer stays with Ronald, the other officers make their way inside the home, and they immediately make a tragic discovery.
Officers identified one victim on the floor. She has a wound to the upper body, and she's also shot in the head. It appears to be execution style.
Officers check the victim's vitals, but it's clear they are too late.
She was pronounced dead on the scene.
As the officers begin to clear the rest of the home, they notice the back door is wide open. Once outside, police are met with another heartbreaking sight.
They found a teenage girl.
She was deceased as well. She had a gunshot wound to the head.
A mother and daughter dead, both shot execution style. But who could have done this? As detectives dig into the case, they'll uncover a dangerous man out for revenge, and a good girl willing to go to great lengths to keep him from being caught. Single mother Ebony Andrews was known for her shy demeanor and sweet disposition.
Ebony was a very beautiful young woman. You would think she was a social butterfly, but she was really quiet and demure.
The 26-year-old loved her children with all her heart.
She was an awesome mom, always making sure her kids had everything that they needed.
Though family was her first priority, her church presence was a close second.
Ebony was involved in the community. She was involved with her church.
Ebony Andrews appeared to be the average all-American good girl.
After the breakup with her children's father, Ebony jumped headfirst into her career.
She had a very exciting job in the food industry. It allowed her to travel a lot of places.
She had family to help her with the kids while she was gone for work.
She was able to support herself. She was living on her own. She was very optimistic about her future and where she was going in life.
Ebony seemed to have everything, but her heart longed for a partner.
She had an apartment, a good job. The only thing that was missing was a man.
Then one night in 2010, it seemed like her prayers had been answered when she met 32-year-old charmer Joseph Cologne.
He spotted her and went right up to introduce himself.
He had this demeanor that demanded attention.
Ebony was immediately intrigued.
He said he was an entrepreneur that owned his own business. It seemed like he had a lot going for him.
He was easy to talk to. It was an excitement that she hadn't felt in a long time.
For her, it seemed like she finally found this guy that checked off all her boxes.
Within months, the pair was inseparable.
Joseph would tell her that he was the man for her, and he would prove it in his actions.
He came in strong, giving her all the attention she was looking for. She did start imagining the future for them.
Joseph even started attending church with Ebony.
She was so happy to find a man that she could share a spiritual connection with.
Ebony was enamored with him, and he was enamored with her as well.
In addition to the spiritual connection, the physical connection between the two was undeniable.
Joseph Cologne swept Ebony off her feet.
It was just something about him that she couldn't resist, even if she tried.
In Joseph's arms, she felt safe. She could really let her guard down and be vulnerable, and that meant the world to her.
With a great job, loving children, a good church, and a man by her side, Ebony had the world at her fingertips. But little did she know that her dream man had a dark secret and would eventually get her into a world of trouble that she never imagined possible. July 31st, 2010. As police cordon off the crime scene of a double homicide in Beaumont, Texas, detectives arrive at the home. They begin their investigation by speaking to the surviving victim, Ronald Woods.
His tensions were heightened. He had run away from gunfire. He seemed a little agitated and upset.
Ronald identifies the two victims as his fiancée, 42-year-old Mary Goodman, and Mary's daughter, Brianna.
Brianna was a great kid, 16, never really got in any trouble.
Mary was a hard worker, and she did everything she could to provide for her daughter. She was also about to embark on a new chapter with the love of her life.
Ronald is in shock, but he tells police he thinks he knows who the shooter is.
His fiancée was going to be a witness in an armed robbery case, and he believed the shooter was connected to that.
With a solid lead, detectives will soon uncover the identity of their gunman and a woman hell-bent on making sure he's never caught.
She kind of just continued down this road of, I'm going to just have his back no matter what.
Single mother Ebony Andrews had fallen hard for charming 32-year-old entrepreneur Joseph Cologne.
Joseph seemed like he had all the qualities Ebony was looking for in a man.
He was handsome, hardworking. He treated Ebony like a princess. She was head over heels for him.
But Ebony would soon learn that Joseph was harboring a dark secret, one that could end up turning her entire life upside down. July 31st, 2010. Detectives are investigating the double homicide of Mary Goodman and her daughter, Brianna.
Mary was found in the doorway of her home, and they found her daughter in the backyard.
You had two people that were shot multiple times, and it looks like it was an execution-style killer.
As police canvassed the neighborhood for the shooter, detectives speak to surviving witness and Mary's fiancé, Ronald Woods.
He was very upset, distraught, crying.
Ronald Woods lost his family in just a matter of seconds.
Fortunately, Ronald is able to give detectives a solid lead.
He said Mary was set to be a witness in the upcoming armed robbery case, and he believed that the shooter was the man she was going to testify against.
Ronald says he doesn't know the man's name, but he's confident in his accusation. According to Ronald, the man first approached them when he was getting ready to leave for work that morning.
Ronald said he was leaving for work at 7:30 a.m., and Mary was seeing him off.
The man walked up. He describes him as 5'8", 180, 190 pounds, dreads of some length.
He says he didn't immediately recognize the man, but it wasn't long before he realized who he was.
The man was clearly upset. He started going off on Mary.
He was shouting things like, "Who do you think you are? You can't do this to me."
Ronald says at first he was trying to defuse the situation. But then, the man pulled out a gun.
The man ordered Ronald and Mary inside at gunpoint.
Once inside, Ronald says he and Mary were terrified.
As he was getting agitated, Mary tried to calm him down.
Just then, Mary's 16-year-old daughter came into the living room, startling the gunman.
Without warning, the suspect begins firing in the direction of Mary's daughter.
Ronald says they all ran for their lives.
Ronald pushed Mary towards the front door, told her to run, and then he took off running towards the back of the house.
He was trying to save Brianna.
He and Brianna, they make their way out to the backyard and run.
Ronald thought Brianna was right behind him, but when he turned back, she was gone.
He knew he needed to find help immediately.
That's when he spotted the officer up the street and flagged him down.
It was obvious he was heartbroken. He had tried to protect the two women, but was unsuccessful.
A quick call to the station confirms Ronald's claim that Mary had been a witness in a pending case. And the name of the man she is set to testify against is 32-year-old Joseph Cologne.
Mary had actually given police a statement against Joe Cologne, identifying him as a perpetrator in a robbery that had gone down several weeks prior.
The evidence appeared that this was retaliation for her cooperating with law enforcement.
Not only that, but Joseph Cologne is no stranger to police.
They find out he has an extensive criminal history.
He was known to deal with drugs in the area.
Detectives show Ronald a picture of Joseph Cologne.
He was able to identify Joseph Cologne as the shooter.
Authorities now have a positive ID on the man who murdered Mary and Brianna Goodman.
In Texas, murdering a witness is a capital offense, and so police issue a capital murder warrant for Joseph Cologne.
They considered Joseph to be armed and dangerous, and he's on the loose in Beaumont.
With the city searching for Joseph Cologne, detectives head back to the station.
The first things that they tried to do was to track where he was using cell phone triangulation.
But when detectives get their hands on Joseph's phone records, it appears the fugitive turned his phone off shortly after the murder. However, detectives hone in on one number that pops up regularly on Joseph's call log.
The number is listed as Ebony Andrews.
Checking the criminal database for Ebony Andrews, they drew a blank.
She had no criminal record, no prior offenses.
Looking over Ebony's social media page, it seems she was a loving mom and active in her church community. Detectives wonder how she's connected to their fugitive.
They decide to give her a call and see what she can tell them about Joseph.
When detectives get Ebony on the phone, she tells them Joseph is her boyfriend. Ebony seems very surprised by their call.
They wondered if she even knew about his criminal history and drug dealings.
Detectives decide to keep things vague for now and don't tell Ebony Joseph is wanted for murder. They ask her if she can point them to her boyfriend's whereabouts.
Ebony told police that she didn't know where he was.
She says she's been busy traveling to Louisiana for work and that she hasn't spoken to him since she left town a few days ago.
However, Ebony says she wants to help in any way she can and agrees to come back to Beaumont for a formal interview. But soon, detectives will discover this sweet, God-fearing young woman isn't as forthcoming as she seems.
When she got the call, her reaction was more of a desire to protect her man.
She was completely under his spell.
July 2010. Beaumont police are investigating the double homicide of 42-year-old Mary Goodman and her daughter, 16-year-old Brianna.
This whole incident is especially tragic. We've lost the life of a mother and a teenage girl.
It was even more egregious because they were in their home, in a place where they felt safe, and it was at a time where they were most vulnerable.
Detectives have issued an arrest warrant for 32-year-old Joseph Cologne.
Mary's fiance identified Joseph Cologne as the shooter.
Ronald Woods tells the police that his fiance had recently identified Joe Cologne as being involved in an aggravated robbery, and that he believed the shootings were retaliation.
Mary Goodman and her daughter Brianna were only targeted because she was trying to do the right thing.
After finding her number in Joseph's call logs, detectives asked Joseph's girlfriend, Ebony Andrews, to come to the station for a formal interview.
She seems very uncomfortable. You can tell she's not used to being in a police station.
Detectives ask Ebony if she's aware of her boyfriend's criminal lifestyle. To their surprise, Ebony says yes.
She says when she first met Joseph, he told her he was an entrepreneur. He kept it pretty vague, but eventually he opened up to her and told her what he really did for a living.
He admitted to her about the drug dealing.
Ebony admits Joseph's line of work made her feel uncomfortable, but she still loved him and thought she could change him.
Despite those red flags that she might have seen, she decided, I'm just going to give this my all. I can change him. I can make him a better man. He's on a better path now.
Ebony was smitten with Joseph. She was really thinking, maybe I can rub off on him and make him a good boy.
She probably felt like she could love him out of this situation.
Then, detectives reveal that Joseph is wanted in connection with a double homicide. Ebony seems shocked.
Ebony swears Joseph would never harm anyone, let alone kill him. She thought that it was just a mistake.
She seemed completely entranced by this guy.
Detectives ask Ebony where Joseph is now, but Ebony echoes her earlier claim.
She tells them she last talked to Joseph on the night she left for New Orleans, a few days before the murder.
She said she knows nothing about the shooting or murders, but will be in touch with him if she hears anything from Joe.
Even though Ebony appears forthcoming, detectives sense she's hiding something.
It seemed odd for her to not keep in contact with Joseph, even if she had been out of town for work.
But with no evidence to back up their suspicions, they let Ebony go.
At this point, the police still couldn't connect the two to the crime.
In the meantime, detectives subpoena Ebony's cell phone records. As they wait for the approval, they get word that Joseph Colon may have been caught on camera fleeing the crime scene.
Police secure a surveillance video from the university near the crime scene.
They ultimately were able to pull videotapes from the dorm that shot out to the street that surrounds that neighborhood where the murder occurred.
Detectives easily identify Joseph Colon. And it seems Joseph was not alone.
They did notice a white car coming in and out of the frames right around the time that the crime happened.
Joseph Colon gets into the passenger seat, and then that vehicle leaves.
Detectives wonder if Joseph's squeaky clean girlfriend could be his accomplice.
Authorities do some digging, and they realize that there's a white vehicle registered to Ebony Andrews, and it looks very similar to that white vehicle in the video.
To investigators, looks like Ebony Andrews could have been the getaway driver for her boyfriend.
When detectives receive Ebony's phone records, they only bolster that theory.
The cell phone data indicates that both Joseph and Ebony's phones were together in the same place at the times of the murder.
Ebony wasn't being honest when she told the police that she had been out of town this whole time.
Ebony's phone records also suggest she's now in Houston, just 85 miles away. The couple appears to be on the run.
Police are pursuing both Ebony Andrews and Joseph Colon in connection with the double homicide.
Authorities know that they need to find this couple, and they need to find them fast.
Soon, police will close in on Joseph Colon and his girlfriend. But he's not going down easily.
They had him surrounded, and he started threatening the cops.
July 2010. Beaumont, Texas police are on the hunt for 32-year-old Joseph Colon. Detectives believe Joseph to be on the run after killing mother and daughter Mary and Brianna Goodman.
He shot them to try to silence Mary so that she wouldn't testify against him in an unrelated robbery case.
Brianna had nothing to do with this. The only thing she had to do with it was that she was Mary's daughter.
Detectives have discovered that Joseph's girlfriend, single mother Ebony Andrews, may have been involved.
Her car was seen on surveillance video picking him up after the murders.
It also appears after lying to police, Ebony went on the run with her man.
Her cell phone data was able to show where they were going.
They believe they were in Houston, which is about 85 miles from Beaumont.
Police were able to put out information about Joseph and Ebony and a description of the vehicle in hopes that someone would see it and be able to help locate them.
On August 11th, detectives get word on the couple's whereabouts. Ebony's car was spotted at a hotel in Houston.
Police locate the hotel and locate their room, and then they move in for an arrest.
They wait until Ebony is outside the room before they announce themselves.
She doesn't see the police. She casually strolls out the room and she gets apprehended.
That's when Joseph realizes what's going on.
He had tried to barricade himself in the room. And even when they told him the room's surrounded, you're not going to get away, he threatened them.
They have no idea what Joseph was capable of at this point. They are concerned that the weapon is still with him and he's dangerous.
It's an intense situation. They don't know if he still has the gun. They do know he's already killed 2 people.
With no choice, detectives burst into the room.
At that point, Joseph knows it's over.
He was arrested and taken into custody.
Both Joseph and Ebony were charged with capital murder, and they faced the death penalty if convicted of that crime.
It seems the couple had finally been stopped, and they left no shortage of evidence behind.
Authorities were able to take samples from Ebony's car, from the passenger's floor and the door handle, and it appeared to be blood.
When lab results came back, it indicated that the blood found belonged to Mary and Brianna Goodman.
Detectives also recover the gun.
They found it stashed away in some nearby brush.
The gun found outside was indeed a match to the bullets found at the crime scene.
Joseph and Ebony are transported back to Beaumont. Detectives hope the overwhelming evidence against the couple will lead to a speedy confession. They try their hand at Joseph first.
Joseph Colon was very smug, just really came across as cocky and confident.
Joseph maintained his innocence and was not talking to the police.
Detectives confront Joseph with the surveillance video, the blood evidence recovered from the vehicle, and the gun. All to no avail.
Joseph Colon requested a lawyer.
That shuts down that avenue of investigation for law enforcement.
Detectives hope they'll have better luck with Ebony.
Since Joseph wouldn't talk to him, police were hopeful that Ebony would help them put together the final pieces of their investigation.
However, detectives will soon discover that this church-going woman's faithfulness to her man is hard to shake.
She had already shown willingness to lie for him before.
Ebony can't turn back. She's a ride-or-die chick. She's made this commitment to him to be by his side no matter what.
August 2010. Detectives are speaking with 26-year-old Ebony Andrews for her connection to the murders of Mary and Brianna Goodman.
They believe Ebony's boyfriend, Joseph Colon, pulled the trigger, and Ebony was the getaway driver.
The video surveillance shows Joe and Ebony leaving the crime scene in Ebony's car.
Cell phone data was also able to show that she was with Joseph minutes after the murder, despite Ebony saying she wasn't.
With her boyfriend refusing to speak, detectives press Ebony hard for the truth.
She's trying to hide it, but you can tell she's clearly wrestling with her conscience about something.
Detectives lay out the charges she faces for her part in the crimes.
She can actually get the death penalty if the capital murder charge sticks.
Authorities hope the charges would maybe make Ebony more willing to testify than withhold information like Joseph.
The police knew Joseph was the mastermind. They knew he's the shooter. He is the one they're after.
As the God-fearing young mother realizes how much trouble she's in, she knows what she has to do.
Ebony was realistic about what's going to happen next. They know I wasn't in New Orleans. They know I was with Joseph the whole time. Ebony had a moment of clarity where she's like, what did I get myself into?
she's thinking, how did I allow this person to pull me into a situation like this?
At this point, she breaks down and tells police everything.
She's got to be scared of losing her kids. She wants to come clean and do the right thing.
According to Ebony, she really did think she could change Joseph and get him on a better path.
By the time he told her about the drug dealing, she was so in love with him that she just didn't want to abandon their relationship.
He told her he could change, and she believed him.
Ebony says for a while, it seemed like Joseph was really making progress.
He continued to attend church with her regularly.
He was going through the motions, doing whatever he had to do to make himself look like a man of God in her eyes.
Ebony says on the morning of July 31st, she thought she was giving Joseph a ride to a friend's house to pick up a stereo.
When they arrived at the house, he told her to stay in the car because it was just going to be a few minutes.
Ebony explains she waited for a while, even texting Joseph. But with no response, she became restless and decided to drive around the block until she heard from him. Then suddenly, Ebony heard gunshots.
Seconds later, she saw Joseph run out into the street.
Ebony's confused because she dropped him off at a different house, but he was coming from a different direction.
Ebony says Joseph quickly got into the passenger side of the car. And that's when she noticed the blood.
He had blood on his clothing, he had a gun in his hand. She knew something bad had happened.
But Ebony claims she had no idea what Joseph had actually done.
She didn't know. He went down the street to where Mary Goodman lived, and that's when he shot Mary and Brianna.
I don't think Ebony understood the gravity of what was about to transpire.
He sweet talked his way into getting her to be like, everything is going to be okay.
Ebony says Joseph didn't divulge any additional details to her. He just told her to drive, and that's what she did.
She arranged for her children to stay with family, and then she took off with Joseph to Houston.
She put not only her faith, but her entire life on hold for this guy.
Ebony admits she loved Joseph, and she didn't want him to get caught.
She didn't want him to get any trouble by using his credit cards, so she paid for the hotel.
Ebony's actions of getting Joseph a room was proof that she's committed to him. And she would do anything for him at all costs.
At this point, it was, I got to do whatever I can for my man.
When Ebony got the call from detectives later that day, she was nervous. But Joseph saw an opportunity.
He told her to go back to Beaumont and speak to them and throw them off his trail. And that's exactly what she did.
Then she went back to Houston to report to Joseph.
Ebony was this good Christian woman, but this guy had such a hold on her, she was ready to throw her Christian morals out the window for him.
Even if Ebony didn't know Joseph was going to kill Mary and Brianna that day, detectives still suspect Joseph must have told her the truth about what happened while they were on the run. And that meant she had been knowingly harboring a dangerous fugitive.
It seems like she had to know about the murders. That's why she lied to the police when he spoke to her before.
Now that Ebony is facing the same capital murder charges as Joseph, will she have to take the fall for what happened, even though he pulled the trigger?
Ebony lied to police for a man. She helped her man flee a crime scene. She then continued to help him remain at large with authorities. She almost helped him get away with murder.
August 2010. Ebony Andrews and her boyfriend, Joseph Cologne, have been charged with the capital murders of Mary and Brianna Goodman.
Ebony could potentially go down for a murder she didn't commit, all because she helped him evade police after the fact.
Under current Texas law, there really isn't an accessory charge. So in cases like this, both people are charged with capital murder, even if only one of them actually pulled the trigger.
Ebony spends 5 long years behind bars, waiting for trial.
One of the things that made this case take so long is DNA. In a normal murder case, the detectives have some discretion about, well, we're only going to test this blood that was found at this scene. In a capital case, you got to test everything.
But in January of 2016, Ebony Andrews gets some good news.
Ultimately, her family and church family raised the money to get to the bondsman so that she could be at least out on house arrest.
She was released from jail with a GPS monitor attached, just to make sure that she doesn't take off again.
She was able to see her children again outside of the prison walls and to get to hold them again.
Just over a year later, in April of 2017, Joseph Cologne's trial gets underway. The prosecution must rely on evidence alone, as Ebony chooses not to testify.
Ebony Andrews did not appear as a witness for the state against Joseph.
If she testified against him, we were concerned for her safety. We think she was taken advantage of by Cologne.
The prosecution contends that Joseph killed Mary and Brianna Goodman in cold blood to prevent Mary from testifying against him for the robbery he committed 5 weeks earlier.
He shot Mary in the torso as she fled for safety towards the door, and then he shot her one last time in the head.
He then catches up with Brianna in the backyard as she's trying to get away and shoots her once in the head.
After all was said and done, Joseph knew he could count on Ebony to help him evade police. And that's exactly what they did.
After a 9-day trial, the jury finds Joseph Cologne guilty of capital murder.
Joseph was sentenced to death by lethal injection, and he's still fighting that in appeals court today.
To everyone's surprise, the prosecution ultimately decides to drop all charges against Ebony.
All charges were dropped against Ebony because of insufficient evidence.
Either A, she didn't know that that's what Joseph was going there to do, or B, she was the worst getaway driver ever, because you can't circle the block in a murder. Somebody's going to come out of the house, and they're going to need you to be where you're supposed to be.
You can't convict someone of capital murder if you can't prove that they knew the murder was going to happen before it actually took place.
They could have charged her with lesser charges for lying to the police, but Ebony had already been in jail for 5 years. They secured the conviction for Joseph. Just seemed like a waste at this point.
For the family members of the victims, Ebony's release was one of mixed reactions.
2 people are dead, lives are lost, and she nearly helped their killer go free.
Mary Goodman did the right thing. And because of it, it cost her and her daughter her life. And that's just horrible.
However, many in the Beaumont community rejoiced in the church-loving mother's freedom.
Ultimately, justice was served, I think, because she's not being charged with a crime that she didn't commit.
When Ebony Andrews fell for Joseph Cologne, she never could have imagined what her man was really capable of.
He manipulated her into thinking that he was a man of God and getting his life together, when in reality, he was a monster. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Ebony fell for a man who wasn't being honest with her, and once she actually knew who he was, she was already so in love with him that she couldn't bear to leave him.
Ebony Andrews essentially became prey to Joseph Cologne. She grew up in the church. She She was looking for love and stability. However, street smart, slick Joseph Cologne had ulterior motives, and unfortunately for Ebony, it almost cost her freedom.
Loving someone with all your heart can allow you to experience life's greatest blessings. But when that bright light of goodness becomes clouded by a wicked storm, it's time to pray for clarity and hope for redemption before you end up paying.
The United States looking for the American dream and thinks she finds it when she meets a successful businessman.
This woman came from a tiny little hamlet in Jamaica and wound up making $1 million a month.
But that's nothing compared to the price Jean pays to show she can be just as ruthless as her man.
Carl and Jean together was a deadly combination.
And later, Rochester, New York single mother Natalie Johnson falls hard for a man with a criminal past.
Get out of the car.
Jarrell hung around a rough crowd. He was known to be the instigator of the group.
And when his need for cash pushes him back to what he knows, he makes sure to take Natalie along with him.
They wrapped her up in a carpet, put her in the blue bin, and dumped her in a ravine.
Natalie went along with Jarrell to the very end, because at some point along the way, the kindness factor turned into a monster factor as well.
There are hundreds of thousands of women in prison at any given time in the U.S. These are the true stories of women who committed heinous crimes in the name of love. For my man. Hoping to escape poverty, 24-year-old Jamaican national Jean Brown comes to the United States in search of a better life and a way to provide for her family.
She left behind her mother, sister, 3 children, a son and 2 daughters.
She figures that her life and the life for her children is going to be better if she can make some money.
Desperate to provide for her family back home, Jean and her determination land in Miami, Florida, penniless and with no job prospects.
When she even came to the U.S. from Jamaica, Jean worked all kind of dead-end jobs. Nothing really came together for her. She struggled a bit.
But she finds refuge in Miami's Jamaican community, and the camaraderie only strengthens her resolve.
When people are in a surrounding or some sort of a town where they're not a native of that particular place, they find solace in someone who has a similar origin or background.
Jean eventually lands a position as a dispatcher for a local trucking company.
The job of dispatcher is to keep track of where the trucks are, take orders from customers, and make sure that things are delivered as required.
It's a good job, but Jean isn't making anywhere near the money she hopes and has very little to send back to her family in Jamaica.
Problem with chasing a dream is that it is just that, a dream. A lot of people are running away from poverty or a bad relationship, looking for new opportunities, but a lot of times they don't have a coherent plan as to how to achieve the things that they really want, what it is that they really want to achieve.
Still, she manages to take advantage of Miami's nightlife.
In the early 90s, Miami was the place. I mean, it was fun, there were clubs, it was just an untapped land where anything goes, and people were doing very well for themselves.
And it's at one of the clubs where Jean meets fellow Jamaican Carl Smith.
He's good looking, he takes an interest in her, he's got that thing that attracts people of like minds.
Okay, so what do you do for a living?
And he's got another thing that Jean finds irresistible: money.
He was a drug dealer, marijuana. He was making fistful of cash, and that was very attractive to her.
Jean and Carl become inseparable as she quickly becomes Carl's partner in love and crime.
Carl told her about the drug business, told her about his connections in Mexico and how they'd be able to get large volumes of marijuana at low prices.
Jean wasn't your typical girlfriend. Jean was looking to make money, and make money any way necessary and any way possible.
Her ambition, combined with her direct line to independent truckers, gives birth to an idea for a devious plan. The two decide to combine their resources and start a trucking company as a way to ship large amounts of marijuana from Mexico to the East Coast.
Jean was very enthusiastic about that. She saw that as an opportunity to get rich quick.
Carl is all for it, but insists they relocate to Baltimore for better distribution to the Northeast corridor.
Carl's contacts would bring the drugs across the border from Mexico. Jean's truckers would pick it up in Arizona and bring it here to Baltimore. And once it arrived in Baltimore, they would sell it.
They were able to move product to New York much more quickly. They were able to get into Pittsburgh much more quickly.
In addition, Charm City's hunger for illegal substances makes it ripe with opportunity.
Baltimore is a city with a major drug problem. There are a lot of drug dealers, a lot of drug users. And so if you're able to get large quantities of marijuana, the dealers figure out who they are and flock to them.
Jean is a very headstrong woman. She wanted to be with Carl, and she knew that she would do whatever she had to do by any means necessary in order to be with him.
Just a few months later, the business model is underway.
They used full-size 18-wheeler trucks that would carry a lot of merchandise, and they'd be able to conceal the marijuana in with the merchandise, and then they could easily conceal the cash on the way back.
And within 6 months, they're making 7 figures.
This woman came from a tiny little hamlet in Jamaica and wound up making at least $1 million a month. She had a palatial estate in Florida. She had land in Jamaica, and she ran a pretty well-oiled business. That's the American dream.
But for Jean, it's not enough. She also wants to prove to Carl that she belongs by his side.
It's already a man's world, but to be a woman and to rise to the top, you had to do stuff that most men would be afraid of.
Jean will do everything in her power to keep Carl, to please Carl, and to do anything it takes to achieve success along with him.
Even if that means putting one of them in an early grave.
This was a driven woman who decided what she was going to do, and nobody was going to stand in her way.
After joining forces with fellow Jamaican Carl Smith, Jean Brown launches a successful drug operation in Baltimore, Maryland.
So things are going well. I mean, from Mexico to Baltimore and all stops in between, money is flowing, drugs are flowing. They're doing about $1 million worth of business a month. They're bringing in whatever they want, and nobody suspects a thing.
And Jean and Carl want to keep it that way.
One of the main challenges for drug dealers is what to do with all the money, because they're generating tremendous volumes of currency and they can't put it in a bank. And so they need to find ways to transport these large volumes of currency out of the country.
A prospect that keeps Jean in regular contact with her family in Jamaica.
She sent the money to Jamaica to be laundered. She's given this money to her family, and they're investing it in real estate for her. So her kids back in Jamaica are being provided for, her family back in Jamaica is being provided for, and she's living in the lap of luxury.
But transporting large bundles of cash out of the country is almost as risky as the drug trade itself.
American regulations prohibit people from carrying more than $10,000 unless they declare it. And Jean's goal was to avoid telling authorities either in the United States or in Jamaica.
Jean and Carl enlist the help of another Jamaican associate named Michael Knight.
Michael Knight was a money courier. Michael's job was to transport money from Baltimore to Jamaica.
Do not let me down.
Yes, sir. Jean's instructions to Michael were to carry that money secretly, not to acknowledge to American authorities that he had it, and not to tell anybody in Jamaica that he was bringing it in.
For the next several years, all goes well. But running a multi-million-dollar drug ring in a male-dominated world takes a heavy hand. Having plenty to prove to her man and herself, Jean quickly takes the lead and shows she's not to be trifled with.
Jean had a reputation for being both physically and verbally abusive. And so if people crossed her, she would let them know, sometimes very aggressively.
Jean was nobody's plaything. She was not a girlfriend. She was not a piece of fun to be had. She was an equal, at least, and a superior to a bunch. She had to make that known. She did make that known.
In Carl, Jean sees someone who's around the same age as she is. He's a risk taker and he's successful at it, just as she is.
When one of their employees disrespects Carl, Jean makes a brutal example of her.
There was one incident where she threw boiling hot water on one of her employees that Jean was angry with. The employee was holding her child at the time.
Jean and Carl had a lot in common. Both of them had very good business acumen, but she was the hardline boss. He was the guy who ran the day-to-day operations and kept all the contacts going. For all things considered, this was a very strong combination, and they were like a dynamic duo, all things considered.
But as merciless as Jean may be at work, at home, it's a different story.
On the business side, she was ruthless, violent. No one crossed her. When it comes to her family, they loved her. They thought of her as a good support to her partner, Carl. I mean, you're talking about the complete polar opposite to what those in the organization saw.
As Jean and Carl's business grows, so does their Baltimore household.
They became closer. They loved each other even more, to the point Jean had a baby. And now you have this new family, a growing family, a business that is, even though it was illegal, it was highly successful for them.
They had at least a solid decade of just smooth sailing. Bada bing, bada boom, money in, drugs out, money in, drugs out, no problem, life's good. And then trouble and purloined paradise.
Cash mule Michael Knight is making his monthly trip to Jamaica with suitcases of cash. A trip he has made countless times. But this time, he catches the eye of a vigilant Jamaican customs agent.
On this one occasion, Michael was caught and arrested in Jamaica with $565,000 in cash.
As the authorities were questioning Michael about this more than $500,000 he has on him, that's when Michael gave up Jean and Carl. He said this money came from drug sales.
Jamaican authorities informed their U.S. counterparts about Jean Brown and Carl Smith's organization.
And at that point, authorities decided to start looking into how extensive this drug ring is.
At the United States' request, Jamaican officials released Michael Knight as not to raise suspicion with Jean and Carl. He returns to Baltimore and tells his employers the money was seized. But, as instructed by them, he refused to claim it.
Jean, who says, cost of doing business, lost $500,000, okay.
Drug organizations recognize that from time to time, their drugs are going to be intercepted. From time to time, their money's going to be intercepted.
You know what? Just go. Even though the money was missing, Jean had no reason not to trust Michael Knight. After all, Carl trusted him. But more than anything else, this was a hardline boss. I mean, she was ruthless. And so she felt that she had Michael Knight under her thumb. Everyone was afraid of her, including Michael Knight. Why would he lie to her?
But almost a year to the day after costing Jean and Carl $500,000, Michael comes up short again.
$250,000 short.
Jean had entrusted Michael with $1 million that she wanted him to hold, and he only returned $750,000. So Jean wanted to find that missing $250,000.
When Jean confronts Michael about the missing cash, Michael refuses to tell her what happened to it.
If a courier is caught by law enforcement takes the money. That's an explanation that the drug dealers can accept. And so when Michael came up short and had no explanation, that really angered Jean.
Carl asks Jean to take care of Michael, and she takes her payback to a gruesome extreme.
If Carl wanted something done, Jean made it happen. Carl didn't have to worry about anything. Carl's job was actually easy. Jean was the one who carried out Carl's bidding. So Michael was kidnapped, just swiped off the streets of Baltimore, out of nowhere. It was Jean's enforcers. They take him outside of the city to an area called White Marsh, take him to an apartment there.
Carl Smith is there. A couple goons are there. Jean is running this. She has Michael Knight tied up with a phone cord.
Jean is interrogating him. Where's my money? Where's my $250,000? And she wasn't getting any answer, any satisfactory answer.
That's when Jean's anger turns to uncontrollable rage.
She's wailing on him with a cell phone. Her goons were standing by while she beat this man so severely she knocked his eyeball back inside its socket.
Jean decides to take the lead on this because Michael has disrespected her and disrespected Carl, and she's not going to let him get away with this.
And the carnage is only just beginning.
Jean said, if he doesn't tell us where the money is, we'll just have to kill him.
Jean orders her henchmen, Peter Blake and Hubert Downer, to take Michael into the bathroom.
She said, finish him.
And later, in New York State, single mother Natalie Johnson will also look to a new man to be her provider. And like Jean Brown, she'll go from bystander to killer.
Jarrell knew the quickest way to make money was to take advantage of a senior, and he knew a senior, and he took advantage of her.
She took his orders, no questions asked.
In Baltimore, Maryland, Jean Brown is dealing with an employee who she believes stole $250,000 from her and her partner in love and business, Carl Smith.
Jean demanded loyalty because this was business. This was the foundation of her relationship with Carl.
Despite the brutal beating, Michael Knight still refuses to say where the missing money went.
So Peter and Hubert put Michael in the bathtub. And stabbed him repeatedly until he was dead.
The human mind can rationalize anything. And this particular case, Jean felt that she wasn't a criminal, she wasn't a killer. She was just protecting her interests, protecting her relationship, and protecting her man.
She was at her worst with him, and she was becoming more of a hardened criminal than her partner.
With Michael Knight dead, Jean orders her men to get rid of the body. No evidence left behind.
Over about 2 days with power saws, they dismember the body. They pack up pieces and dispose of the body around Baltimore County in a number of places. The body's never been recovered.
Jean and Carl believe they've gotten away with murder. But just in case, they decide to lay low in Miami, Florida. Little do they know, Maryland investigators are already onto them. And a missing persons report filed for Michael Knight only adds fuel to the fire.
After about 4 or 5 days, his sister wound up calling Baltimore area police to say, I need to file a missing persons report. Nobody can find my brother. The Baltimore police look into it.
And it isn't just Baltimore police.
In the meantime, federal law enforcement was also looking for Michael Knight because the Jean Brown organization was now on the federal radar.
Hoping to put pressure on Jean Brown, investigators track her and Carl down in Florida.
And then, surprise, surprise, here comes the detectives wanted to know what Jean knew about Michael. The detectives asked Jean, what do you know about Michael Knight? What's your connection to him? She denies everything. But at that point, she gets nervous.
Jean and Carl realized after the police came down to Florida that the heat was on. And so they left and went to Mexico.
But once in Mexico, Jean realizes more than the scenery has changed.
Between the Fed looking at them, between detectives back in Maryland looking at them, their relationship goes through a rocky road. There's trouble in their relationship.
I called the shots. Carl was done. He was a multimillionaire. What more did he need?
I don't work for you, okay?
He wasn't happy being with Jean either. He let her know this.
Carl's not happy. He starts searching Mexico for love, and he finds it.
He takes off and doesn't look back.
And Gene said then, "Oh no, you don't leave Gene Brown."
But it goes beyond a lover's betrayal. Gene worries that if she loses Carl, his Mexican cartel connection goes with him.
Jean didn't want to let that happen. She had a very successful and very lucrative marijuana business, and she wanted to keep it going.
So she goes to the Mexican connections. Now keep in mind, these are the same connections Carl introduced her to not too long ago.
Jean saw this as the ultimate betrayal. This is a woman who saw everything as her and Carl, just the ultimate relationship. And now, if he's not with her, well, in her mind, he's against her.
And the next day, Carl is mysteriously assassinated on a lone Mexican highway.
And what wound up happening is that Carl Smith and his new paramour were in a car, and goons shot Carl Smith dead in front of his girlfriend. She got shot 4 or 5 times through the arm, and they left her for dead. She wound up living. Gene Brown made her point.
The next day, Jean returns to Miami to run her drug empire, which is now hers and hers alone. But the FBI has been busy while she was away.
They connected with her associates, and one by one, they coughed up Gene Brown without hesitation. And by the time Jean gets back to the United States, the feds had the case that they needed against her, not just for the drug ring, but for Michael Knight's murder.
She's arrested for numerous drug activities and for the first-degree murder of Michael Knight.
She went to trial and was convicted of the conspiracy to engage in murder, kidnapping, drug distribution, and racketeering.
15 years after coming to America, Gene Brown is sentenced to life in prison.
Well, I think Gene has learned that crime doesn't pay. Ultimately, you're going to get caught. The drug business is a business with no future.
At the end of the day, she started with nothing, she ended with nothing.
She's probably lamenting, if anything, that the reason for it all is gone. She can't provide for her family in Jamaica. Her children don't have a mother, and everything she worked for has been seized. So, was it worth it? Probably not.
Sometimes two people don't bring the best out of each other, and that was definitely the case with Gene and Carl.
Gene Brown's love for her man led to a life lived larger than a mythical movie crime lord. In New York, the lengths to which Natalie Johnson will go to please her man will be on a far different scale, yet lead her to the same end. Life starts out on the straight and narrow for Natalie Johnson in a modest rental home in the Great Lakes city of Rochester, New York.
Natalie grew up with 2 parents in the home. She was well taken care of, so she had all the things that she wanted, although they weren't very rich.
As a teenager, she studies hard.
Her parents encouraged her, and they backed her going to college, and she started to study nursing, and she earned a certificate in nursing.
She gets a good job in a nursing home, but at the age of 22, she hits a snag.
She became pregnant. The relationship died. So she remained with her parents. They helped raise the child. They assisted her because they believed in her dream. So they did all they could to help her succeed.
She worked hard. She was trying to better herself.
But life isn't all work and no play for Natalie. Far from it. She enjoys her fair share of relationships.
She was pretty sexually active. She wasn't exactly the most attractive girl, but she had her way finding men into her life. Kind of like the attention.
But by the age of 26, Natalie is looking for more than sex. She wants love, and she's about to find it, with some deadly strings attached.
He knew what he was looking for in terms of being a predator. Natalie fit the bill. Once she became involved with him, it just snowballed out of control.
In Rochester, New York, 26-year-old single mother Natalie Johnson spends her days working at an assisted living facility and her nights out with friends playing the field.
Natalie was kind of a fast girl. She kind of liked the attention.
During one such night out, she meets handsome charmer Jarrell Henry.
He was the type of person that was very smooth and very dangerous. And I believe that the smooth came before the danger.
But while 27-year-old Jarrell Henry is saying all the right things, there's one thing she can't help but notice: a police GPS tracking device.
Jarrell had committed a violent carjacking, and he was sent away for 10 years. So an ankle bracelet, that GPS was put on him as a condition of his parole.
He had a gun. I mean, he used the gun in terms of intimidating the victim into letting him take their car.
Despite his record, Natalie finds herself smitten with Jarrell's charm.
Jarrell showed her attention, which she was craving for, apparently. She slept with him, and that's the beginning of their relationship.
Even though Natalie was ambitious and outgoing, this is a woman who suffered with poor self-esteem. So when a good-looking guy presents himself to her and her friends and chooses her over her girlfriends, well, she's taken by it hook, line, and sinker.
Natalie not only falls deeply in love with Jarrell, she also thinks he is the perfect father for her daughter.
Natalie was looking for someone to care for her child, and when she met Jarrell, she felt that he could fill those shoes.
And less than 2 weeks after their first night together, Jarrell leaves the home he shares with his grandparents.
Jarrell was adopted by his grandparents at probably the age of 5 and lived right there on Hazelwood Terrace. So often with grandparents who take over raising their children's children, when they become young adults, they pretty much run the household.
But none of the red flags stop Natalie. She invites him to move in with her, her parents, and her now 4-year-old daughter.
She was madly in love with him, and the parents thought, well, maybe this is someone for her. You know, a lasting relationship.
They got along very well with her daughter. They got along extremely well. They had a good rapport. She saw that. She loved it. And she wanted to continue that.
But while Jarrell may play the role of father figure, there's one crucial way in which he can't contribute to the household.
Jarrell had a terrible time finding a job due to the fact that he had a criminal record.
If you have a record, it's very difficult to get hired. So that causes a great deal of frustration.
To not be able to get a job, to not be able to make money, and we're talking about the male ego, so those sorts of things are so important. To not have those things, that's got to be emasculating, especially to a young man.
Jarrell had nothing to offer Natalie other than the fact of companionship and making her feel good.
He was looking for some way to make money, to get money, fast.
And despite the fact that he's on parole, he turns to the only thing he knows.
Instead of getting a job like everyone else does, he just decided that his job was to rob.
Natalie really felt like she needed him, so in order to keep him, she would do anything that he asked her to do.
Jarrell tells Natalie he has the perfect robbery target in mind: his grandparents' next-door neighbor, 73-year-old Edlin Chun.
Edline was originally from the Big Island of Hawaii. She came to Rochester and she became an adjunct professor at RIT. And she was there for 20 years.
She was involved in 13 different charities. Edlin was a kind and generous and giving person.
But none of this matters to Jarrell, who only sees Edlin as a ticket to instant money.
A couple of things made her a good target. One, her age. Number two is that the perception is that because she was possibly Asian, that she had cash, large sums of money in the home or available to her.
After some minor hesitation, Jarrell convinces Natalie to help him.
The dream of a better life is a driving force for Natalie. So even if it means going along with some of the nefarious plans of Jarrell, well, she's willing to do it.
One early morning, soon after telling Natalie about his terrible plan, Jarrell decides the day has come to put his plan in motion. He rouses Natalie out of her sleep and asks her to drive him to his old neighborhood.
Jarrell went to Edline's home with Natalie. He had a basket of fruit to apparently offer her.
Under the guise of wanting to introduce his girlfriend to an old neighbor, Jarrell asks Edlin if he and Natalie can come inside.
Edline had known Jarrell since he was a little boy. She knew that he was in and out of trouble, so she was a little leery.
And that's when he just pushed her back and knocked her over.
Jarrell and Natalie bound her up with the duct tape. They duct taped her ankles, duct taped her wrist, and they basically interrogated her relative to what was in the house that they could take, whether it was cash, whether it was jewelry.
Not getting the answers he wants, Jarrell's desperation skyrockets. And within minutes, things go from bad to worse.
Don't lie to me.
In Rochester, New York, Natalie Johnson and her ex-con lover Jarrell Henry, desperate for easy money, decide to rob Jarrell's childhood neighbor, 73-year-old Edlin Chun.
The fact that she was an older female living by herself, she was very vulnerable.
Where's the money?
The moment he walks into the house, Natalie knows this isn't the Jarrell she once knew. This is a guy who's in charge, who's going to do whatever he has to do, and now she's so scared that she will follow whatever commands he gives.
After knocking Edlin down, the pair gets to work implementing their plan.
While Jarrell was restraining Edline, he told Natalie to search and see what she could find. I think she found some jewelry or something like that, but I guess not everything that he wanted or everything that he thought was there.
They're somewhere in this house. Where are they?
Natalie is a caretaker, and so she really believes that once Jarrell does what he has to do, then they're just going to leave and everything will be okay.
Jarrell went searching. He went everywhere, and he also went up into the attic and apparently found a .22 caliber rifle.
Edlin's house had been broken into twice, and so a friend of hers gave her a rifle to keep loaded in the house. And of course, there's no way she would have ever lifted that rifle to hurt anyone. So she put it up in the attic.
In another room, Natalie finds their biggest score, Edlin's checkbook.
You're gonna sign each and every one.
Jarrell demanded at gunpoint that she sign checks made out to them so that they could cash them.
Edline was very upset. You can imagine how upset she was and how frantic she was. Natalie was trying to calm her down.
She was comforting her and saying, oh, everything's gonna be okay.
At least that's what Natalie hopes, until Edlin mouths off to Jarrell.
As soon as I can, I'm going to the police.
Adeline said something to set him off. She said, the moment I can go to the police, I will.
He did what he felt he had to do to silence her.
Jarrell shot Edlin twice in the head. One of the shots went through here and went through here to disfigure her jaw.
Jarrell killed this woman in front of Natalie, but she didn't call the police. She probably was thinking, well, if she says anything about this is going to put her man behind bars, so she's not going to be with him anymore. So she was totally in concert with him.
She couldn't at that point in time say, I'm no longer in, because now she becomes a witness and she would have to be dealt with in the same way.
Natalie sees the man she loves, the man who she feels could be a father to her daughter, actually kill someone. So now, in her mind, in her body, she just goes totally numb.
She is frozen with fear, while Jarrell gets to work covering their tracks.
They were very careful about making sure that they cleaned up behind themselves. They used plastic gloves. They were pretty sure that no one saw them come in and out of her residence. So they were very sure that they had done a good job.
He's already got plans for the almost $20,000 in cash from the pre-signed checks.
Jarrell calls up two friends. He offers them $10,000 to help them dispose of the body.
They wrapped her up in a blanket, and they had put her body into this plastic bin.
And eventually what they did was they took the bin to Tryon Park, which is a kind of remote area in Rochester with a lot of ravines.
Once there, the gang dumps Edlin's lifeless body like a piece of garbage.
And what had happened was that She had come out of the bin. The bin had stopped on a ledge, and her body had ended up down below. After that, they left.
Jarrell then paid off his friends with one of those checks.
Cash this check immediately.
Jarrell and his friends part ways, and he and Natalie return home as if nothing had happened.
No one saw anything.
Natalie is really stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's nothing that she can do about this right now. Bottom line is, if he goes down, she goes down. And then she loses her dream. She loses her man. She loses her freedom.
The next night, Natalie goes to work at the nursing home, while Jarrell returns to his old neighborhood and steals Edlin's car. Little do they know that 3 days after their crime, workers in Tryon Park find Edlin's lifeless body and call the police.
She was wearing a sweatshirt that had Rochester Works over the front. So they went to that business and asked who might have that sweatshirt. They said there was board members only who were given those sweatshirts. They had a photograph of Edlin at the scene of where she was dumped, and one of the employees there identified her as Edlin. They were able to determine where she lived based on their information.
Looked at the house. They couldn't figure out, why in the world would someone kill this RIT professor who was so instrumental in helping people in the community. They did notice that her car was missing. So obviously they put out a bulletin to be on the lookout for her car.
Jarrell and Natalie think they've covered their tracks, but Jarrell's impulsivity will be their ultimate undoing.
He was dead set on committing this crime and totally forgot that he was being tracked every inch of the way.
"26-year-old Natalie Johnson and her boyfriend of 2 weeks, Jarrell Henry, believe they've gotten away with the murder of 73-year-old Edlin Chun in Rochester, New York.
It's amazing to me that someone, after doing such a horrific act of murder, could just go back to their home and pretend nothing happened.
After the crime, Natalie felt more attached to Jarrell. After going through this heinous crime from the beginning to the end, she felt even closer to him and felt more attached to him because they had done this together.
But police are hot on their trail.
What they didn't realize was once they dumped her body down this ravine, her body came out the bin and her body was exposed.
As the chief of police, I had 15 to 20 people come to my office demanding that we solve this crime due to the fact that they wanted to see justice brought to Edlin.
In addition to putting out an APB for Edlin's car, they go door to door, asking if anyone saw or heard anything unusual over the past few days.
In doing a neighborhood check, they were able to determine that one of the neighbors was Jarrell. They made the determination that he had just been released from prison and was on parole and had been released to that house at next door.
Police decide to check Jarrell's tracking device, something he seemed to forget all about.
And the way that they knew that he was involved in this whole thing was that ankle bracelet, that GPS. It tied him to Edline's home. It tied him to Tryon Park.
And the same GPS device that is used to tie him to the murder also leads police right to Jarrell's whereabouts the next night.
Jarrell was arrested driving Edline's car. He had her cell phone, he had $10,000 in cash, and even the .22 caliber rifle.
Jarrell was charged with murder 1 because with depraved indifference to another person's life, he took that life.
He doesn't rat out Natalie, and she might have gotten away with murder, except she told a friend about her role, and he goes straight to the police. Days later, she's picked up by authorities and booked.
Natalie lost a great love, Jarrell, and she knows that if she goes to jail, she's going to lose her daughter, too. So she's going to say whatever she has to say in order to stay out of jail.
Natalie was charged with murder second, which means that she was present when a person not involved in the crime was killed.
Facing life in prison, she's offered a plea bargain. A shorter sentence if she testifies against Jarrell Henry. But she rejects it.
Natalie would not turn on Jarrell. She would not be a witness against him. She was still standing by her man.
But Natalie's insistence to stand by her man only results in her own trial 9 months later.
Natalie claims she was sleeping the whole time of the crime.
The jury doesn't buy her story, and Natalie Johnson is sentenced to 25 years to life.
One way that they were able to connect Natalie to the crime was that they found the gloves that were used in the commission of the crime in her car. So they were able to trace it and tie her into the whole thing.
During sentencing, she was able to give a statement, and she said that she was the victim and that her child would be a victim and that she would be away from her daughter. Her daughter would grow up without a mother. But she never said that she was a victim of Jarrell's.
In a separate trial, Jarrell Henry is found guilty of murder in the first degree and receives a life sentence.
Prior to being involved in this incident, Natalie was somebody who took serious efforts to have a good life, to have a good employment, to take care of her young daughter. I think once she became involved with him, they became involved in a circumstance that just snowballed out of control.
People wonder, someone like Natalie, who seems so normal, how she can fall so fast and so hard for a guy wearing an ankle bracelet.
The impact that Jarrell Henry had on Natalie Johnson's life was so severe. She went from a caring, loving person and loving mother to a monster.
Natalie just kind of surrendered herself for her man, and now she's suffering the consequences.
She had a legitimate concern for the welfare of this neighbor.
Police make their way into the residence to do a welfare check on the homeowner, 50-year-old Shanita Glanville. But after they enter the home, the officers are shocked by what they find.
They find the man on the floor, dead.
He was shot once in the head, once in the torso, and once in the arm.
A woman who they believe to be Shanita is lying just a few feet away from the male victim.
They find her lying face down, 2 shots through the rear of her head.
She was killed execution style.
Who would want to gun down these 2 victims? And why?
People, they were shocked. They were confused. This kind of thing doesn't happen in that town.
As police try to make sense of this double homicide, they'll uncover a tangled web of deceit, where one woman's desire to please her man put those she loved in danger.
She was willing to do whatever it took to make sure her man was happy.
Chanel Cunningham was known for her warm personality and impeccable taste in fashion.
Chanel was beautiful. She was vibrant. Her smile lit up a room.
The fashionista was determined to own her own store one day.
Chanel was willing to work hard to have a store of her own. That was her dream.
At a party one night in February of 1998, Chanel crossed paths with someone who seemed like he could make all her dreams come true. Swanky businessman Maurice Phillips.
Maurice was a handsome, just brown-skinned young man, and she is absolutely awestruck by him.
He had swagger like nobody else. She was amazed by him.
Instantly, there's this connection.
Maurice and Chanel talked for hours.
He was smart. He had his own business. Maurice was everything that she had been looking for.
What she saw in him was someone who was just as driven as she was, just as ambitious. They were a perfect match.
From that night on, Chanel and Maurice were inseparable.
Once Maurice Phillips and Chanel started dating, things got intense.
Chanel felt like she hit the jackpot. She finally found a man that she could depend on, a man that could take care of things.
Chanel had found everything that she was looking for in Maurice. She was absolutely enamored by him.
If Chanel wanted a Prince Charming, Maurice stepped into that role immediately.
Maurice showered Chanel with exotic trips and a life of luxury.
Maurice, he gave the appearance of perfection. He took her to romantic places around the world and gave her what she thought she would never see.
Maurice and Chanel, they were doing it all. They went to Super Bowls, Celebrity All-Star Weekend basketball games.
Chanel not only fell in love with Maurice, she also fell in love with that lifestyle. And we're talking about a lifestyle of fancy cars, big houses.
In the summer of 2001, Maurice also made Chanel's dream of starting her own boutique come true.
He worked with her to start her own business, and just as he had done for himself, she was really inspired by him.
Because of Maurice, Chanel is really walking in the life that she's envisioned for herself.
But little did Chanel know that behind all of the bling, there was more to Maurice and his small business than met the eye.
Maurice was really looking for someone he could trust, and he saw that in Chanel.
Whatever he was doing, she became his ride or die.
June 26, 2002. Detectives have just arrived at the scene of a brutal double homicide at a residence in Winmore, Pennsylvania. The homeowner, Shanita Glanville, and a male victim have been found shot to death.
She had been killed execution style, 2 shots in the back of her head.
The man was shot once in the head, once in the arm, and in the torso as well.
Officers informed detectives that the male victim is Shanita's godson, Dane King, and that they suspect the murders occurred around 24 hours prior.
The police learned from neighbors that Dane King had just came down from Philadelphia to help Shanita with some computer issues.
Detectives believe the assailant wasn't after Dane, but his godmother.
The shooter probably didn't expect somebody else to be there.
It's a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But that's not the only reason detectives suspect Shanita Glanville was the killer's main target.
They knew Shanita was an informant.
Shanita had been working with detectives in their investigation of a local drug ring. And it seems the drug ring may have found out.
Shanita was ratting them out. They could have wanted to silence Shanita for good.
The hunt for Shanita and Dane's killer is on, and police think they know just who they're looking for. But what they don't yet know is that there's another suspect at the center of this brutal slaying. One whose loyalty veered towards love over friendship.
She would do anything for him. She got herself and her friend so engrossed in this that there was really no way out.
Reached the point that she always dreamed she could be at.
But soon, a friend would threaten the lifestyle that Chanel had grown to love. And shots would ring out.
Chanel was ready to do whatever it took to keep Maurice safe, to keep her family safe, and keep them together.
June 26, 2002. Windmore detectives are investigating the brutal double homicide of Shanita Glanville and Dane King.
They find her with 2 shots to the rear of her head.
Next to Shanita is her godson, Dane King. He's found with multiple gunshots to the body.
Detectives believe Shanita's godson was an innocent bystander, and that Shanita was the targeted hit.
Shanita was working with the feds, working up a case against this immense drug operation.
It was a major cocaine empire that was spreading throughout the Northeast.
Shanita was ratting them out. They could have wanted to silence Shanita for good.
Shanita had started working with law enforcement just 1 month earlier, after her home was raided by federal agents for suspicion of money laundering.
They're looking for W-2 forms, tax forms. They've confiscated everything.
In order to avoid jail time, Shanita jumped at the chance to make a deal with law enforcement.
Shanita was very interested in working with the FBI agent, to better her situation. She pretty much started at the beginning and told them everything.
Shanita told them she had been working for Maurice Phillips, who was already on investigators' radar for drugs.
Maurice was a dangerous man.
He's involved in some really bad stuff and with some really bad people.
Detectives know that if Maurice found out Shanita was a rat, he would have wanted revenge. But before police can officially pin the double homicide on Maurice, they'll need cold, hard proof.
They're looking for paperwork, they're looking for documents, they're looking for the money trail.
However, it soon becomes evident that Maurice couldn't have been the one who pulled the trigger.
At the time of the crime, Maurice was at a luxury restaurant, which could be verified by surveillance cameras.
He had a rock-solid alibi.
Detectives know that just because Maurice didn't pull the trigger doesn't mean he's innocent. They wade through Maurice's financial records and see that he withdrew a large sum of cash on the same day as the murders.
Maurice could have set it up. It's a classic kind of gangland style hit. Murder for hire.
And within Maurice's phone records, detectives find a clue that just might lead them to a potential hitman. They see that on the day of the crime, Maurice made a flurry of phone calls to a single number.
He calls his cousin in Tennessee numerous times.
Detectives identify Maurice's cousin as 31-year-old Bryant Patterson. And from looking at Bryant's credit card transactions, it appears he made a quick round trip to Philadelphia in the days before and after the murders.
The cousin, not living in the Philadelphia area, was the best person to come in, get the job done, and go back home. Less likely to be a suspect because he's not from the area.
When detectives reach out to their counterparts in Tennessee for assistance with locating Bryant, they're met with a surprise.
Bryant was arrested in Tennessee on a gun charge, unrelated to this criminal activity in the Philadelphia area.
Detectives travel down to Tennessee to speak with Bryant. In an interrogation room, they're pleased to find that their suspect is willing to talk.
Bryant wanted to make a deal with the police.
Bryant admits that he's the one who gunned down Shanita and Dane.
He said, "I'm your shooter. I'm the one that did the killing."
Bryant was spilling the beans.
But Bryant isn't going down alone.
Chanel loved Maurice. Love makes you do crazy things sometimes.
She lost her best friend because she was at the point where she would do anything for a man.
Working with the feds, and we're working up a case against Maurice, and this is the reason why he wanted Shanita eliminated.
But before detectives can take down Maurice Phillips, they need cold, hard proof of their theory. Luckily, they're now sitting down in a Tennessee interrogation room with someone who can help. Maurice's cousin, Bryant Patterson.
Bryant actually confessed to being the murderer. He pulled the trigger.
Bryant confirms he carried out the crime at his cousin's behest.
Bryant Patterson tells investigators that he didn't know Shanita personally. His cousin, Maurice, commissioned him to do a hit, and Maurice offered him $18,000 for the murder.
Bryant tells detectives it all started a few weeks before, on June 24th.
He got a phone call from his cousin. His cousin told him to come to Philly so they could take care of a problem.
Bryant says he made the drive up to Philly right away. And once he got there, Maurice filled him in.
Maurice informed Bryant that Shanita needed to be taken care of.
Maurice told Bryant that Shanita was a rat and she needed to be silenced before she took the entire organization down.
He said, "You need to help eliminate this problem."
Maurice gives him a .45 caliber gun.
Maurice gave Bryant the address and told him, "Go take care of the snitch."
Bryant tells police that Maurice had carefully covered every detail.
Maurice wanted to be as far away from this crime as possible.
He's going to be at a restaurant where a lot of people can see him.
Bryant then gives authorities a play-by-play of what happened on the night of June 25th.
He parked at a local business down the street from Shanita's home.
Bryant opened the door and crept inside, with Shanita none the wiser.
As soon as he sees her, he pulls out the .45, tells her to get on the ground, and shoots her in the back of the head twice. Execution style.
Bryant says he didn't know Shanita's godson was visiting, but he couldn't leave any witnesses.
Dane King immediately is scared. He starts trying to fight Bryant.
He was fighting for his life. Bryant turned the gun on Dane, and he emptied the chamber.
Once both victims were dead, Bryant called Maurice.
He called Maurice Phillips on the phone and told him, "It's done. I did it."
Bryant tells detectives that Maurice then gave him instructions to collect his earnings.
Maurice informed Bryant that you go and meet this person at this location and they're going to pay you $16,000.
But Bryant says the location of the second portion of his earnings took him by surprise.
Maurice tells Bryant he can go to the boutique that he and Chanel own and he can get the rest of the money
At this admission, detectives' ears perk up. Maurice's girlfriend has been on their radar ever since their talks with Shanita.
Shanita and Chanel were the best of friends. So much so that they were family.
According to Shanita, Chanel was in charge of recruitment for her man's drug empire. And Chanel was the one who had convinced Shanita to get involved in the first place.
Chanel explained that it was her role in Maurice's business to keep an eye out for people that were intelligent, people that could crunch numbers, that could move money around. And being that Shanita was a mortgage broker, she fit the bill to a T.
Now detectives wonder if Chanel also had a hand in planning her friend's demise.
Did Chanel have anything to do with it?
She didn't want to lose him. She didn't want her man to go to jail.
In the summer of 2002, police have charged 31-year-old Bryant Patterson for pulling the trigger in the brutal shooting of Shanita Glanville and her godson, Dane King. But Bryant claims it was all at the behest of his cousin, drug kingpin Maurice Phillips.
Bryant told the police, I did it for Maurice Phillips. That's who hired me to do it. And he paid me $18,000 to do this killing.
Maurice found out that Shanita, in essence, was a snitch. So he called Bryant and hired him to silence Shanita for good.
With more than enough evidence to take down Maurice, detectives only have one question remaining. Was Maurice's girlfriend, Chanel Cunningham, involved in the murder-for-hire plot? After all, Bryant did go to Chanel and Maurice's boutique after the murders to collect part of his earnings.
Maurice had given him the privy to go to Chanel's store and get $2,000 worth of goods for himself to make up for the other $2,000 of the $18,000 he was promised for the murder.
Unfortunately for police, Bryant doesn't seem to know much more about Chanel's involvement.
When he came into the store, he got what he wanted. He did, and he left.
After detectives arrive back in Philadelphia, police head to Chanel and Maurice's home with a search warrant in hand. The officers approach with caution.
They knew Maurice was dangerous. In order to get the power that he had, you had to be willing to do some dangerous things.
Maurice answers the door. And fortunately, he complies without incident. Chanel comes out just in time to see her man being cuffed, only to have the officers apprehend her next.
She knew when she was arrested that the only thing that she could do was cooperate with police. That her life of luxury and fantasy was over.
Back at the station, detectives speak to Maurice first.
They tell Maurice that they know that he had ordered the hit on Shanita. They have Bryant's confession and his role in murder for hire.
But Maurice isn't going down easy.
Maurice denies it. He says they're trying to throw him under the bus.
Maurice says that Bryant did this all on his own. He wasn't involved.
With Maurice refusing to cooperate, detectives book him on a myriad of charges.
Maurice is charged with murder for hire. He's charged with criminal conspiracy, money laundering, and distributing cocaine.
Next up is Chanel. Detectives are still unsure if she was involved in the double homicide and are hoping they can finally get the truth.
They were able to connect Chanel with the drug business, but they were never really able to connect her to the murder.
Detectives notice that when they bring up Shanita's death, Chanel becomes visibly upset.
Chanel, she always considered Shanita to be like an aunt to her. They were very close.
At that point, it turned realistic. This was no longer the fairy tale.
Chanel tells detectives she's ready to talk.
As much as she loved Maurice, she was ready to tell whatever they needed to know.
She says at first, she fell in love with Maurice's swagger, and at the time, didn't realize what he was involved in. But after a while, Maurice told Chanel the truth.
Small businesses were the front for a drug business.
Chanel admits that although she was surprised at first, she wasn't fazed.
By this time, Chanel didn't even care how he made his money. She was down for him, and she was down to help.
She loves Maurice, and she loves the lifestyle. So she's not going to give up on the love, and she's not going to give up on the lifestyle.
Chanel tells detectives she slowly got integrated into Maurice's drug business.
Chanel became completely engrossed in the business, and it wasn't just Maurice anymore. It was both of them involved in this criminal activity.
Chanel says that's when she offered a solution that she'll regret for the rest of her life.
Chanel loved Maurice so much that she was willing to not only risk her life, her freedom.
Summer 2002. Detectives have arrested Maurice Phillips and Chanel Cunningham for their role in a multi-million-dollar cocaine ring.
They are right on their heels of bringing down this drug conspiracy.
They believe Maurice paid his cousin, Bryant Patterson, to kill police informant Shanita Glanville.
Maurice tells Brian that he needed to get rid of Shanita before she could testify against him.
Unfortunately, Shanita wasn't the only one who suffered Maurice's wrath.
Bryant then turned the gun on the godson, Dane King.
With Bryant in custody and his confession in tow, detectives have what they need on Maurice. But they're still not sure if Chanel was involved in the hit on Shanita.
They can connect Chanel to the drug business, but they can't connect her to Shanita's death.
Fortunately, Chanel has decided to come clean and tell all.
She knows all she can do is cooperate and pray that they have leniency.
Chanel admits that she eventually became immersed in Maurice's drug business. And by the fall of 2000, their empire began soaring to new heights.
Their drug business was expanding, and they were making money exponentially. So much so that they kind of didn't know what to do with all the money that they were making.
They couldn't very well just walk into a bank and make millions of dollars in a deposit and expect no one to notice.
If you're living in a certain size house and you're driving a certain size car and you're paying certain size taxes, people start looking at your bank accounts.
That's when Chanel got an idea for a new recruit, her longtime family friend, Shanita Glanville.
Shanita Glanville was a successful mortgage broker. She was known for doing well in her business. She was known for crunching numbers.
Chanel and Shanita's relationship was really close. They loved each other. Shanita was pretty much an aunt towards Chanel.
Chanel knew that Shanita was exactly what Maurice would need to hide all of this illegal money they were making.
Chanel tells detectives when she made the proposal to Shanita, her friend was taken aback at first.
When Shanita heard these words, she couldn't believe that Chanel was wrapped up into something this major.
But when Chanel told Shanita how much money she would make, Shanita caved.
She agreed. As much as she was reluctant at first, she was looking at the green.
Chanel tells detectives, from that point on, she and Shanita worked together to strengthen the ring's cover.
They would create false documents, W-2s, anything to make the drug operation look as legitimate as possible.
They were buying properties and selling properties with false institutions that they owned.
Chanel says things were going well once Shanita got involved. That is, until Maurice caught wind of the raid at Shanita's house.
Maurice has been in this game a long time before he met Chanel. And so the people that he works with know people who know people.
When Maurice suspected that Shanita was the informant, he was furious.
Maurice told Chanel that if Shanita flipped on them, it would be Chanel's fault, since she's the one who brought Shanita into the business.
Maurice now wants Chanel to go and confront Shanita and ask her, are you cooperating? Are you telling on us? Are you squealing on us?
Chanel loved Maurice. And Chanel was willing to do anything for her man. She did as Maurice requested her to do. She went over, she talked to Shanita.
She demanded to know if Shanita had said anything about Chanel and Maurice's operation.
Shanita, she was absolutely frantic that Maurice knew about the raid.
She's scared out of her mind because she knows what Maurice is capable of.
Chanel says Shanita was hysterical, adamantly denying the allegations. And Chanel believed her.
She called Maurice on the phone and said, I just confronted her. She's not involved in ratting on us. She's still with us.
She tried to talk Maurice down, and she thought that she did.
He told her, okay, I'm not going to do anything to her.
Chanel said after that, she thought everything was squashed. She believed Shanita, and she thought that Maurice did too.
But a few days later, Chanel and Maurice got word from an associate that Shanita hadn't been honest with them.
He flew off the handle.
She knew the love that he had for her. And when it came down to the business, there is no love.
In the summer of 2002, police are speaking with 29-year-old Chanel Cunningham about her role in an extensive drug ring led by her kingpin boyfriend, Maurice Phillips. Detectives believe Maurice is also behind a murder-for-hire scheme that left 2 people dead, including Chanel's best friend, Shanita Glanville.
You've got Bryant, the guy that carried out the murder for hire, who's willing to testify that Maurice orchestrated it.
There's just one question remaining. Was Chanel involved in her friend's murder?
They know that Chanel is involved in the drug dealing, but they don't know if she's at all implicated in the murder of her friend Shanita.
Chanel tells detectives that a few weeks before the murder, Maurice ordered her to confront Shanita after he got wind of the raid at her house.
Chanel had come to her and confronted her.
When her friend denied working with police, she believed her.
Chanel called Maurice and told Maurice that she didn't betray them at all.
But the situation was far from over. A few days later, Maurice told Chanel that he found out Shanita had lied to her.
That must have been chilling when he told her that.
Chanel was shocked. She was afraid of Maurice.
Chanel knew Maurice was furious, but she loved him. She didn't want to think that he was capable of doing this to her friend.
Chanel says she thought about warning Shanita that Maurice had found out the truth, but didn't want to cross her man.
She's kind of torn between her friendship and her love for her man.
Chanel says on June 25th, Maurice told her that his cousin was going to retrieve some merchandise from their store.
When Bryant went to pick up his $2,000 in luxury items at the boutique, Chanel had no knowledge of why Maurice was being so generous. She no way thought that Bryant arrived in Philly from Tennessee to kill her best friend.
But later, Maurice unleashed his dirty secret.
Maurice told her what had happened. Shanita was dead.
Said, babe, I had to do this for us. You know, it was either her or us.
Chanel was devastated, but she tried not to show it.
Chanel says that after Maurice confessed, although she was shocked, they never spoke about it again. And she admitted that she still loved him.
This was a man she had been with for years. She didn't want to lose him.
Chanel says she regrets not coming forward to police. But most of all, she regrets that she didn't warn her friend.
Chanel tells police that she felt remorse for Shanita's death. She feels ashamed that she didn't say anything sooner.
Even though Chanel had nothing to do with her friend's murder, she's still charged with a plethora of crimes regarding her involvement in the drug organization.
She's charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine, transactional money laundering, and aiding and abetting.
In January of 2010, Maurice's trial gets underway in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Chanel Cunningham is the prosecution's star witness.
Chanel decided to testify against Maurice because this is not how she wanted it to end. Yes, she loved Maurice, but she also loved Shanita, and Shanita was dead.
Bryant Patterson also testifies against Maurice. And the kingpin is ultimately found guilty.
He receives 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
For their cooperation, Chanel and Bryant are given leniency by the court.
Chanel Cunningham receives 12 years after pleading guilty for money laundering and drug conspiracy.
As for triggerman Bryant Patterson, he walks away with the least time of the 3.
After pleading guilty for murder for hire, Bryant Patterson receives 9 years and 4 months.
People were shocked and angry after hearing Bryant Patterson's sentencing.
The family was outraged at the fact that he got this little bit of time for double murder.
Life is just absolutely invaluable. So when you're at that crossroads between love and life, choose life.
Being in love can make you feel like you have everything you'll ever need. It can make you look away, even when the one you love hurts the people who are most important to you. But love doesn't always last forever. And when it's gone, and you've turned your back on your true friends, who will you turn to then?
Hello, xin chào mọi người nha. Hôm nay mình sẽ hướng dẫn mọi người tô màu cho một cậu bé đang chăm chỉ đọc sách và tiếp thu kiến thức nha mọi người. Và bây giờ mình sẽ hướng dẫn mọi người tô màu cho cậu bé này luôn nha. Mọi người hãy theo dõi mình nhé. Mình sẽ bắt đầu nha mọi người. Nhất cô có thù. Mình sẽ tô cậu bé này mặc một chiếc áo màu xanh lá cây nhài. Và quyển sách này mình sẽ tô bằng màu Màu gì còn nhiều nhỉ? Màu xanh nước biển đi nha. Đây nha mọi người. Đó, mình sẽ tô vào đây nha. Yo. Vô nha mọi người. Vô nha mọi người. Vô. Ôi giật cả mình. Nhanh mà. Alo.
Mày ơi, bao giờ mày về mày có thể về nhà tao cầm của tao mấy cốc tàu hũ xong rồi mày mang ăn cho tao được không?
Bực lờ, nay tao về muộn đấy.
Mày tao đi muộn tao quên mất tao bị bận đi.
Thế thì mai về ăn nhá.
Không, mai về bằng không muốn ăn đêm nay tao làm hết cả đêm mà.
Bực lờ. xem có mệt không. Nay tao làm muộn quá rồi, làm để cuối tuần còn nghỉ. Tại mẹ tao lên, tao phải ở nhà, tao đéo thể bỏ mẹ tao ở nhà một mình được, không thì mẹ tao lại đi hỏi linh tinh bác bảo vệ, tao mệt lắm.
Này ơi, em đang thuê 607.
Ai?
Ta định chuyển lên phòng đấy nhưng mà ta thích phòng đấy thôi.
Sao không chuyển lên?
Không, em ta thích cái phòng đấy, không phải là chỉ có phòng đấy đâu, em đây ở giờ đấy cả.
Em mày là đứa nào là vậy? Hả? Hả? À, cái thằng con trai đấy á? Có mỗi phòng 607 thôi à? Phòng 607 đang trống á? Ui ơi, bao nhiêu tiền?
3 triệu.
Có ban công à?
Có ban công nhỏ trong phòng.
Ban công nhỏ trong phòng á?
Đúng theo phòng mày mà cái ban công mà nó chia ra. Vậy.
Phòng mình 607. Ủa? Thế bao giờ nó chuyển ra đây? Hả? Hả? Cái gì cơ? Cọc rồi thì vào mà ở. Vâng, nếu mà bác bảo thì cứ vào mà ở. Mày nhớ không? Cái đợt mày chuyển về mày chuyển về đây xong mày ở một tuần xong rồi sang tháng mới đấy, anh cũng không tính tiền nhà, anh tính mỗi điện nước thôi mà. Thì bây giờ còn 2 tuần nữa là hết tháng đúng không? Thì mày bảo với anh Hiếu, hỏi anh Hiếu thử xem không thì anh tính tiền nhà nửa tháng đấy, mày phải hỏi anh Hiếu trước. Sao mày không bảo nó nếu mà bí quá thì sang phòng đấy mà ngủ cho chúng mày nhau.
Nhưng mà để không phải là nếu như mà phải đóng tiền ấy thì ở nhà ta cho nó đỡ đi.
À, thế thì mày bảo nó đóng tiền ở phòng mày cùng luôn nhá.
Đóng tiền ở phòng không à?
Mày bảo nó đóng 1/3 đi, tăng ra nó ở phòng mày thì nó cũng dùng điện nước cùng bọn mày đúng không? Mà bây giờ còn nửa tháng nữa thì hết tháng, mày bảo nó đóng tiền nửa tháng. Hả? Hỏi chấm. Không, ý là nó ở với mày từ dưới nửa tháng đúng không? Thì vẫn mất tiền điện tiền nước của mày. Thì mày bảo nó là đóng tiền của mày nửa tháng. Chứ chẳng lẽ bây giờ nó dùng điện nước của mày, xong bây giờ nó bị tiêu lố lên gấp đôi thì sao? Thì mày định tự chịu cái tiền đấy à?
Thì có sao đâu.
Hỏi chấm. Mày bảo nó đi. Mẹ đang chơi dở. Oh no 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 no. Vô nha mọi người. Vô. Ok em mọi người. Các bạn là về lấy cho nó cái cốc tàu hũ mang ra cho nó ăn với. Đây này. Bởi vì hôm nay nó đi làm vội quá, nó làm từ 6 giờ mà, từ 6 giờ đến 7 giờ sáng ngày mai. Bảo để xem nếu không mệt thì mang ra. Ok. Vô nha mọi người ơi. Ngồi đợi một chút nhé. Vô nha mọi người. Yo. Và đây là bức tranh của mình sau khi mình đã tô màu xong nha mọi người. Mọi người có thể tham khảo theo bức tranh của mình để tô nha. Theo bức tranh. Ok, bye bye, hẹn gặp lại mọi người vào những video lần sau nhé.